Good afternoon, my friends. I hope you're fine. And I know it's the last day of classes, and I mean last week of classes, and you're busy, finishing stuff, and unfortunately, this is going to be our last class. Um, I say unfortunately because there is so much more that I wanted to teach you, but yeah, we have only so much time, and I can cover only so much material in a given semester. Any part of what we've been talking about could be made into a whole course, right? A whole course on. Uh, the- anyway, but we have condensed this. This is just an introduction to the material, dealing with late antique and medieval history of Western Asia. My friends, in throughout this sort of course, I have gone back and forth uh, between Middle East and Western Asia. Please forgive me for using Middle East at the times that I did. And please do not follow me in that. And please, let's make a deal that we will call this region Western Asia, and undermine all the all the negativity and the turmoil and the wealth and the colonialism that the concept of Middle East carries with it. Yeah? Okay. So I left you last session with the Seljuks. I told you that the coming of the Seljuks is basically a watershed in Western Asian history, in the sense that from somewhere in East Asia, right? And the well, we're going to talk about, well, somewhere from Central Asia to the borders of China, let's say, yeah. The Seljukids came, and then of course they at 1071, if you remember, they at the Battle of Manzikert, they beat the Ottomans. They were victorious against the Ottomans, and therefore Anatolia, which was extremely important part of Byzantine Empire, was gradually severed from the empire itself, and in fact it was Turkified. This is how we get the name of Turkey, as you remember. So the coming of the Seljuks, besides bringing Anatolia into the sphere of, so to speak, Western Asian history, although yeah, right. I mean, you see. Even the concept of Western Asian is not does not include everything, because the Byzantine Empire, for example, uh, had Anatolia, which is Western Asia, um, through 1071, right? Um, but nevertheless, the Byzantines are known as Eastern Romans. I mean, they knew themselves as Romans, not even Eastern Romans. At any rate, so the coming of Seljuks was very, very important, right? It introduced a new language and a new people into the peoples of Western Asia, and as you know, in Western Asia, by now, we know that it has a rich cultural sort of um, dimension to it, of course, right? And amongst which is the diversity of its people, and the Turks become another one of these people of Western Asia, right? So I took you through the Seljukids, and now I want to take you through the Mongols, right? Of course, Saunders provides all the details for everything that I'm talking about, right, my friends? So, but for a number of reasons, I want to just give you a sketch of Chinese history because the coming of the Mongols would involve them, right? A sketch of Chinese history before we proceed, right? So as you can see, I mean, along with other cultures, river valley, so to speak, quote unquote, civilizations, right? Settlement of the Neolithic culture, right? Settlement, and the whole Neolithic culture starts from 10,000 BCE and it goes to 2000 BCE, right? So then we have the um, his Xia dynasty, about which we don't know much, right? And that takes us another half a century into the second millennia, right? 1600 BCE, right? So, but the first dynasty that we know of, and we are rather certain of their, I mean, of that the fact that they exist, and we consider actually the beginning of Chinese civilization from there, right, is the Shang dynasty, right, which was one of the three dynasties thought to mark the beginning of Chinese civilization. And it was characterized by its writing system, right? By the practice of divination, by walled cities, by bronze technology, and use of horse drawn chariots, right? So yeah, the Shang dynasty, right? Then we come to the Zhou dynasty, as you can see that rules for a long time from 1046 to 256, say 246, right? That is basically uh, eight centuries, yeah, 8 centuries. The Zhou dynasty is written Zhou, but it's pronounced Zhou, right? And it divides to Western Zhous and Eastern Zhous, right? And then it even encompasses a period that is called the uh, period of warring states, as you see here, right? And okay, warring states, as you can see there, my friends, and then which is these periods where China goes into turmoil. There are a number of periods such as that, and it's of course very, very understandable because China is a vast territory, right? And with various cultures included in it, right? So, but then we get to the Qin dynasty, from which we get the name of China, right? And they were contemporaneous with the Huns, right? And with the Romans, yeah? And they created a centralized administration. They standardized the writing system. They standardized weight and measures. I mean, all of this was basically taking place in the rest of Western Asia as well, but also in Eastern Asia, right? So standardizing writing scripts, weights and measurements, right? And Qin dynasty, which was not did not rule that long. You see, 221 to 206, right? Okay, so the Qin dynasty, right, begins to be contemporaneous with the Parthians, right? So then we come to Hans, right, which who are like extremely sort of, I mean, basically contemporary with the Parthians, right, and then they one of the important things that happens there is that in the Confucianism, right, comes to the foreground, and that's basically the ethics. It comprises the ethics for Chinese ethics and legal system and whatnot, right? And it reached Han power reached Korea and Vietnam and whatnot. So then again we have 3 centuries of period of disunity from the from the early third century to late sixth century, right? And then, as you can see, the Sui dynasty, right, for a century, basically, less than a century, the Tang dynasty, right, and this is when and the Tang are flourishing when we see the beginning of the so-called, remember, golden age of usually known as Islam, but we call it golden age of Western Asia because what was the most important dimension of the golden age of Islam was in fact the fact that it dealt with sciences, right? Basically, what happened there was that sciences were reintroduced, sciences were, took leaps during this period and continued as we shall see through the Mongolian and Timurid period as well as the Ottoman period, right? And I mean, I'm going to briefly talk about all of this, right? So the Song dynasty, right? The Tang and the Song dynasty both, right? With especially both of them were both periods were basically a flowering of Chinese civilization also there. So cosmopolitanism, right, and cultural flowering, the height of Buddhist influence in China, territorial expansion until they are defeated, remember, by the Arabs, right, at the end of the Umayyad Empire in 751, right? And the Song dynasty as well, right? We have, into the 13th century, basically significant, and we will see why, significant economic and social change, monetization of the economy, growth in commerce and maritime trade, urban expansion and technological innovations, bureaucratic recruitment of Confucian sort of bureaucrats, which and these came to form the intellectual underpinning for the social order of the imperial period. So this is a general Chinese sort of, you know, like a unbelievably short sort of um, description of a very, very ancient and very important civilization, right? Which contributed quite a lot also to Western Asian civilization, by the way, right? And which basically you know continued into the Mongol period and the Mongol relationships with the Chinese. So talking about the Mongols, right? So who were the Mongols, right? The Mongols basically were a population that came from, so you see here, there is the Taklamakan Desert, right? And you see that, and this 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 part here is China, right? And you know it goes, of course, to the east and to the south and becomes the major sort of part of East Asian um, big part of East Asia, right? So the Mongols were coming from a tribe called Khitan, and we're going to get to it, that were basically in the eastern steppes of Mongolia, and we're going to be talking about it. But when we're talking about Mongols, right, we're basically talking about the achievements, right, in the 13th century, right, of what I mean, the achievements that occurred under three Mongol emperors, right? The first and most important of these are Genghis Khan, or I have gone back and forth between Genghis Khan and Genghis Khan in the it's not systematic because I want you to know both of them. Genghis Khan is perhaps closer, but anyway, it's the Persian definition, rendition of Genghis Khan, and Genghis Khan. I think, I mean, it's the anglicized version of it, right? So Genghis Khan was originally called Temujin, and he started in, as I said, in Mongolia. And one of the first things that he did, and one of the things that came to sort of contribute significantly to the development of the Mongol Empire in general, right, was that he began by uh, bringing to a unitary fold, right? Beginning to bring together various Turkic, and various Mongolian tribes, right? In the Turco-Mongolian sort of nucleus that he first established, right? And of course, in this way, he amassed a great army, right, under his control, right? But and this army, you know, you really needed to to devise a sort of system that could put these in order. So he started with a decimal sort of system, and you said, you know, an army of 10,000 people, you know, is made of you know, 10 10 armies of 1,000, right? And these armies of 1,000, right, then will be divided to 10 of 100, right, and so on and so forth, right? So you know, you create regiments, and you basically dispatch these regiments to various part of your realm, right? One of the other characteristics the Mongol Empire that Genghis Khan or Chengiz Khan established, one of the other sort of dimensions of it was that it was a family rule, right? Basically, the empire was the work of Chengiz and his son Ogadai and his grandson Kublai Khan, right? Um, but but then these themselves had sons and their sons had sons and so on. So the Mongolian Empire, like the Seljuk Empire, that established the Iqta system, right? Remember, you read it in your Saunders, the Iqta system. Basically, I mean, you could maybe you could call it a feudal system as such, because instead, to the generals of the army, for instance, instead of giving pay in monetary recompense, right, you would give a piece of land, right, the produce and the benefits of which goes perpetually to the general, and then from the general it would go to his sons and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of possibilities of political fragmentation. And once we get to the sort of the tree of the Mongolians, you will see what I mean. So these people, right? They were nomads. Basically, they had a nomadic sort of life. Basically, what nomadic means is a way of life and it means that in search of pasture land, right? You go in different seasons. You go from, depending on the season and depending on the land, you go from one habitat to another habitat, right? So they were initially herders of sheep, goats, horses, camels, and yaks. And yaks are a type of bovine, which means basically cows. And they were able to they basically were all basically cavalry, and they brought so many men to their wars that they were known for the destruction and the fear and the destruction that they brought on the wake of the creation of the empire. As they created the empire, they also created a lot of hardship at the initially for the people, right? To make an example of cities that did not accept their rulership, and they would decimate a whole city population. So that's where they did to a major city in northeastern Iran called Nishapur, which is very close to the burial site of the Shiite Imam burial site, which literally Mashhad means the place of the place where you have become a martyr, and basically Neishabu very close to Mashhad, and like it, a very this is a pilgrimage center for the pilgrimage center for the Shiites, right? Excuse me. And they basically destroyed a very important and productive and culturally active, right, cities of Iran. So one of the things that I wanted to I will talk about this more in this session, but one of the things that I wanted to make sure to highlight it to you, my friends, is that remember during the Abbasid period, basically when the disintegration begins, right? As soon as the Turunids come in Egypt, and then the Tahirids and Safavids and all whatnot, all the Iranian dynasties came to the east, right? As soon as there was, besides Baghdad, in the so-called golden age of Western civilization, besides Baghdad, right, Western Asian civilization, besides Baghdad, they were old cities dotted not only Western Asia but North Africa, right? So from Morocco to Fez to Cairo to Baghdad to Damascus to Jerusalem to you know cities in Upper Mesopotamia to Tabriz in northwestern Iran. Cities all over Iran, they were all producing culture, right? They all benefited from this disappearance of borders that was the result of the Abbasid takeover of the northern route. Remember, so all these cities were really really flourishing cities. So when we say that Nishabur was totally destroyed, yeah, you have to imagine another city of the golden age of Western Asian civilization was destroyed, right? But that was this destruction was not wholesale, of course, because then if it was wholesale, then the whole population of Western Asia would become Turco-Mongolian, right? I mean, everybody would be destroyed, and then the Mongols and the Turks would take over, and then the history of the rest of the history of Western Asia would have been much different. But so it was. So this was initially, and it was selectively, it was done selectively in order to sow fear, right, into other cities, and basically scare them into submission. And anyway, as soon as this initial destruction was done away with, right, you get a flourishing of culture that we will get to, right? So much for this so-called golden age of um, you know, quote unquote Islamic, but really Western Asian civilization, right, continues under the Mongols and continues even afterwards, as we will see, right? So the Mongols, right, a little bit more about them. They were an Altaic people, like Altai Mountains, right, sort of north of Mongolia, right, and Temujin was Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan was its first emperor, the first emperor that basically established the empire around the turn of the 1200s, right? Um, so Temujin himself died in 1227, excuse me, at an advanced age, if I'm not mistaken. But don't, yeah. Uh, so and then the last Mongol emperor was sort of deposed by the Ming dynasty in 1368 in China, right? Because they had been, there was fragmentation, as we will see. Different groups went their own different ways, right? But the Chinese, the Mongolians of the China remained, right? Um, uh, until 1368, and a branch of them that ruled over Iran and were known as the Il Khans, right, continued into the end of the 14th century when we get the Timurid dynasty, and we will talk about that today as well. Okay, so and this is their language. I am a little bit unsure about this part of this person Leon's sort of drawing of this family tree, because as uh, last that I knew, neither Sumerian nor Elamites have been deciphered, so we don't know to which group of languages they belong. But what I wanted to know, right, is for you to see that from the Uralic family is connected to Altaic family, right, so that such that Mongolian, and Turkic, right, are connected to Finnish, right, and Hungarian, and to some of these languages of Eastern Europe. And on the other hand, they're connected to, on some levels, to Korean, Japanese, and and um, and this one is Austronesian, right, languages, and that's the languages of Australia and the islands around it, right? So they carried with them this language, and this is the homeland of um, Temujin or Genghis Khan, right? So he amassed a strong force of 23 clans and tribes, right? And at a Kurultai, meaning a Mongolian assembly that usually took place in a magnificent yurts, and this is the particular Mongolian tents, as we will see, right? And in a so the Mongolian tents and the Kurultai, but I'm sure again you have read this in your Saunders. Okay, so this is the homeland, right, of the Mongolians. It's in a place called, this homeland is called Khitan, right? Khitan homeland, right? And Kara means black, right? And Mongolians use colors very much to depict, Turco-Mongolians to depict each other, right? So Genghis Khan, right, basically translates to either forceful or universal leader, depending on your interpretation, right? So during Changiz's rule, Changiz comes to the eastern conquers a vast empire already that ends in the eastern parts of the Caspian Sea, as you can see, right? And they went and they made skirmishes to around, but it was not until under his son and grandson um, that we go further west, right? So okay, so the universal reader, Genghis Khan, is acknowledged as such in a Kurultai, right, that takes place in, I believe, Karakorum, which is one of the capitals that the Chinese had, right? Karakorum, one of the three capitals, and I think we're going to get to that later. So here you see is the Khitan, right, which came to be known also as the Liao Empire, right? Khitan, or the Khitan Empire, or the Liao Empire, from which the Mongolian Genghis Genghis comes, right? But I want to make a point of you seeing what I mean by a fragmented um, sort of uh, Western Asian Western and East Asian sort of um, plateau, I mean, basically continent, if you will, right? So you see that once the Seljuks come and take over they took over the whole Anatolia, right? But there are different states also created here, right? And at the time of the Seljukids, from the Seljukid period to the Mongolian period, you get the short-living Crusader states, right? And that come, and then you basically see what else is happening, right? Um, um, this is also Turkic Khanan, Kipchak, the Khwarezmian are Iranians, right? And Karakhitai is the Khitans that we were talking about. Uyghurs, right, that are being persecuted by the Chinese now, right? Um, the Song dynasty of China, right? And so on and so forth. So this is how the area looks, say circa 1200, right? Yeah, okay. So then, and these are the Mongolian tents and yurts that I talked to you about, right? It was in 1206 that Genghis that Temujin was given to the name of Chengiz, yeah? Um, so, um, so by 1204, right? Um, you have the Mongol Empire created by 1204, and we talked about the military system that he introduced, right? These are the miniatures that reached their heights and include Iranian as well as Turkic, and later on in the Indian realm, Indian, and later on in the Ottoman realm, Turkic sort of elements to, and the best ones of them produced in Iran and imitated around Western Asia, where there was a Persianate culture, my friends, right? So, okay, to continue, right? We talked about Changiz's army, right? Uh, and well, uh, one of the first things that Changiz and his main armies do is to go and conquer northern China and the Jin dynasty, where they put an end to the Jin dynasty in 1234, right? And this is where the Jin dynasty was, very close to Mongolia, of course, right? And you know, this is a depiction of a nobleman being served, right? Um, if not I don't think this is the emperor. Okay, all right, my friends. So then, as I told you, the major Mongol rulers are basically Genghis Khan, Ogedai, and Kublai Khan, right? Although these others are also important. And they go from 1206 to 1294, right? Basically, the whole 13th century, right? 1206 to 1294. So 13th century is the 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 heyday of the Turco-Mongolians, of the Mongolian Empire, especially, and a vast empire is created as a result of the coming of the Mongols and much else, and we will talk about it in a second, right? In 1231, after having conquered the Jin dynasty, northern China, he goes west, right? He goes to Kharazm, and you see Kharazm, a Persianate realm that becomes Turkified, gradually by the coming of the Seljuks and then the Mongols. The Khwarezmian, this is, remember, it is the Aral Sea, right? So between the Aral Sea and the Caspian Sea, right? And you can see that the Khwarezmians come and take over a whole bunch of trade routes, right? The Gulf routes, right? The Silk route, right? The route from Bactria to to southern Iran, right? Um, so Right. So he conquers the Khwarezmian realm as well, right? So therefore, the empire that he had created when he died in 1227, and his son was chosen, Ogedai was chosen, right? Ogedai, his son, Obadiah was chosen to lead the empire. He was pretty happy, right? because he had inherited a major empire that was built basically by Genghis Khan, right? Um, and like the Achaemenids before them, right? And everybody else after the Achaemenids, they create a organized messenger system, right? Covering most of Asia, right? So in the Kurultai, right? And this is a yurt, right? Yurt, where you would have a curl tie, right? And so this is huge, right? So in 1229, a curl tie is held, and Ogadai is chosen. The son of Genghis is chosen as the supreme uh, Khan, right? And this is a miniature rendition of him assuming the throne, right? And yeah, so okay, uh, so in 1237, 1238, the by this time the um, Changizid Empire kind of is divided into two, right? The Western Wing, or the Blue Horde. Uh, uh, I mean, the whole thing is called the Golden Horde, right? And the western section is called Blue Horde, and the eastern section is called White Horde, right? And Blue Horde goes, right, and annihilates the Bulgars, right? Hungary, right? It goes um, as Hungary. They take over Kiev, right? And you see they go as far as Hungary, right? Uh, so the right wing was ruled by Batu Khan. The left wing, known as um, White Horde, something is wrong and doesn't matter which is west, which is east. I think this is obviously correct, right? Anyway, Blue Horde and White Horde, and the White Horde was ruled by the Timurids, to which we are going to get shortly, right? So Batu, and we will get to the tree of these Mongolites, and you'll see what I mean. But Batu, one of the Mongolian, you know, sub emperors, if you will, and the grandson of Genghis Khan, uh, comes and expands the Golden Horde, right? And first gets Kiev, right, and the major city of Russia, and and uh, and Kiev, and then he goes on to Hungary and Belgrade, right? Um, so this Kublai Khan was born in 1215 while Changiz was still alive, right? He became a very skilled warrior and hunter in mid 13th century, in 1251, right? Uh, Kublai's brother Monk becomes the great Khan and rules the Mongol Empire, right? And in 1259 he is killed, and in 1260, Kublai is called the Great Khan, right? 1260. And this is where he retreated, right? And Kublai Khan, right? And retreated in order to write his poems, right? He was also a poet, and we will come across Mongol emperors who were themselves scientists as well, right? So anyway, as a result of the fact, right, that the Mongolians came on the scene, right? Once again, like during the Abbasid period, there were no borders to speak of, right? From the Pacific Ocean, basically, right, to the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe, right? And this is the trade routes, right? And trade could could extend, right? Of course, this is belongs to the period of the Parthians, right? But this is the Silk Route that was established, and it had become unsafe. Prior to the Mongol times, with all the wars with the Seljuqis and then the Samanids and the Ghaznavids, right? You have read all of this from your Saunders, right? So the Silk Road was unsafe then, but once it fell under Mongol control, and the roads that by misnomer have been come to be called Silk Road because silk was the most important item that was traded on these, right? Sort of flourished again, and they were not just the one simple Silk Road, as you can see, right? It was Oceanic Road. There was the Oceanic Road, and there was the Overland Road, right? And that the Abbasids had taken over, right? And these roads, you could trade horses, porcelain, you guys, right? Jewels, silk, paper, porcelain, for instance, must have been sort of carried by the sea, right? Because on the back of a camel, right, or on the back of a donkey, they might break, right? Okay. And the same with paper, which was right a technology, if you remember, that was introduced by the Chinese to the Muslim world, right? Early in the Abbasid period in Baghdad, where you remember you had all these paper making sort of stalls and all these quote unquote bookstores, right? Not quote unquote, but really bookstores, right? And so on and so forth, right? So the ease of travel, it was the ease of travel created by the Mongols, and the riches that were created by the Mongols, and taken over by the Mongols, and so on and so forth, right? Basically, spread their names into Europe, right? Because now I want you to imagine. Okay, hold the thoughts here, right? Okay, so yeah, the Mongols, they went as far as Hungary, so their fame increases, in Europe, right? And okay, so hold on here, right? Of the Mongols. Now I want you to like bring your mind's eye, right, to Western Europe, right? You remember Western Europe, my friends, right? To I mean, if you want to put Greece in Western Europe, be my guest. It's a different tradition, but proximity-wise, right? But anyway, imagine the Greeks, the Italians, right? And the what is Germany to the north of it. Imagine France. Imagine Spain. Da, da, da. The fame of the Mongols get to them. And this is in Western Europe, this is the time that a mercantile economy is flourishing, right? Mercantile economy is flourishing. And cities such as Venice, Paris, um, Bruges in uh, in Flanders, i.e., in Belgium, and a number of other cities in Belgium and London, right? All these mercantile cities are beginning to uh, appear on the scene already from 1100s, 1000, 1100s onward. But at this time they are rich. They have become rich, right? And they are they I mean, from Venice they are uh, trading with Eastern Mediterranean, parts of which is under the Crusaders, right? Remember, Mongols and Crusaders are kind of contemporaneous, right? There are four crusading campaigns, and we're going to get to them in a second. Is contemporaneous with what we're describing here, right? So then the fame, the riches, and everything of the East again is the hallmark of the reputation of the East for the West, right? So again, the flow of trade is mostly from East to the West, right? Except there is one commodity that the West is not producing, and that is textile, right? That in England, right, sheeps are sort of cultivated, right, and they're basically fleece and skin and whatnot are being used, and they go to these yarns go to various other places in order for textile to come out of them, textiles with different fabrics, right? And that's how for instance, you get the Flemish, these Flemish curtains. I don't know what you have seen or not, like huge curtains with colors that are coming from the East, with motifs that are coming from the East, and so on and so forth are being produced. It is in the midst of this that a Venetian merchants, Venice being one of those cities, called Marco Polo, takes up his family and says, let's go to China, right? I mean, that takes a lot of guts, my friends, right? From Venice to China, right? That takes a lot of guts. So in fact, Marco Polo does sort of does go to China, right? And comes to Kublai Khan's court, if I'm not mistaken, and actually lives with his family there, right? And is recruited into the administration of the Mongols, right? So now, remember, they were talking. We have been hearing a lot about the supposed golden age of Islam, right? Which we call golden age of Western Asian civilization, right? Because it was all over Western Asia and North Africa with these cities, as I mentioned to you, right? Um, and that it collapsed after the Mongol invasion. Well, I am sorry, it did not, right? During the Mongol period, it was during the Mongol period that one of the most sophisticated observatories, right, astronomy and mathematics takes leaps, right, in an observatory that is created in northwestern Iran, and has became a prototype of other sort of observatories. And this is something that I cannot get into, my friends, now, but it was during the Mongol and later on Timurid period that this observatory in Malaqeh, which is in Azerbaijan in the northwest of Iran, right, was almost getting the scientists studying there were almost getting I mean, we're basically coming up with the theory of heliocentrism, which later on was picked up by Copernicus and European scientists, right? Of the Renaissance period, right? 1500 to say 1400 to sort of 1700, the period of the Renaissance, after which we get to Enlightenment, right, my friends? Yeah. So okay, so this was in 1260. This observatory was established by Hulegu, the same person who sacked Baghdad, right, and put an end to the caliphate, right, also created this observatory in 1260s. 1258 was the sack of Baghdad, right? 1260s was the observatory that was established in Maroc in Azerbaijan, right? And yeah, and basically incredible sort of achievements that they had. So when I mean, and I can go on and on with the contributions of the Mongols and with the scientists that lived during the Mongol period, including the Ilkhanids in Iran, right? But I leave that up to you to pursue, right? And you have to unfortunately search under unfavorable terms, right? You have to search under Islamic scientists in the 1200s, right? Muslim scientists in the 1200s, right? For you to get into the names of the mathematicians and the astronomers and scientists, basically that oh yeah, of course they were Muslim, right? Uh, but they were scientists before being. I mean, they devoted their lives to sciences. Let's put it this way, okay? Um, so I told you about Marco Polo, right? His father had a profitable trade with China already, right? And he travels by sea to the Persian Gulf, right? You see, because he's coming from Venice, right, to the Persian Gulf, and he probably comes from Venice. He comes through the Red Sea and goes to the Persian Gulf, right? And then he takes a caravan route across the Gobi Desert, right? Which is one of these major deserts here, um, and reaches the the Chinese, right, with his family, right. So what was the result of the creation of this Silk Road? Cosmopolitanism, of course, right? It was a road on which all merchants traveled, right? And what they exchanged, what? They exchanged commodities, but what else did they exchange? Huh? They exchanged ideas, of course, right? The Mongols, the Turco-Mongolians, um, the Mongolians, let's say, were never really religious people to begin with, right? But therefore they were quite tolerant, right? Unlike the Seljuks, who established, as you have read, madrasas, and promulgated a strict orthodoxy. I mean, created basically a strict orthodoxy, right? Because orthodoxy or hereticism is in the eye of the beholder, right? All heretics consider themselves orthodox, right? Of course, not all orthodox consider themselves heretics, but you see how confused that whole issue is, right, my friends? Okay, so this is supposed to be a depiction of one of the markets and one of the cities on the Silk Road. Balkh, uh, Samarkand, Bukhara, all these cities in Central Asia, and then going west again, throughout Iran, right? That was also flourishing under the Ilkhanid dynasties, if as you have read in your Saunders, right, my friends? So, okay, so good, everything excellent, right? There is a Pax Romana, right, established. In fact, right, Pax Romana is established, and everybody benefits from it in the 13th century, right? But then, right, people carry goods, people carry ideas, but people also carry diseases, or mice that carry diseases. So therefore, from the eastern reaches of Asia, right, with these trade folks, right, comes the Black Death, right, known as the bubonic plague, right, that spreads in Europe, right, and decimates basically at least one third of Europe, if not half. I forget now, my friends. And the figure that you see here, right, is the doctor of the Black Death, right? And he has the attire the way you see in order not to be contaminated with the bubonic plague when he comes across a patient, right? So death and disease follow on the wake of um, of the uh, of Pax Romania, right? You remember that was 1200, so look at it, we are whole now 1346, from 1346 until 1352, basically, right? You have this disease ravaging basically Europe and, of course, the northern steppes of certain Central Asia, right? Um, so it is in these desperate times, right, on the wake again, right, at the end of these times, right, that you get the on the wake of the Mongols, that you get the Turco-Mongolian dynasty of the Timurids, right? And the Timurids come, right, and they um, if the 13th century was uh, Pax Mongolia, Mongol, yeah, Pax Mongolia, right? If the 13th century was that, and then the first half of the 14th century was the bubonic plague, right? 2 decades after that, Timurid, Timurids appear again, right, in from Central Asia, right, and they come and conquer the Golden Horde, the Eastern Golden Horde, of course, and go. They conquer also Mesopotamia, right? But you see, they cannot come further than what is now Upper Mesopotamia, right? Meanwhile, you have your Mamluks, remember your Mamluks there, right? And so on and so forth. So the Timurids come, right? And we will see, right, that what else is going on in Anatolia. In Anatolia, on the wake of the Seljuks, and then the Mongols, and then the Timurids never get there, right? But all these petty kingdoms, Turkic kingdoms, right, are established, right? Um, um, yeah, that you can see here, right? I don't want you to learn their names, but Hamitolura, Hamitogluulari, right? Um, Lari being the Turkish suffix for being belonging to, right? Uh, anyway, lar being plural and lari being belonging to, right? Anyway, so the Timurids come on the scene, right? And then the Timurids, right? The Timurids um, come with their own scientific sort of uh, outlook, right? But before the Timurids come, right? This is the way in the 13th and 14th century the four Mongol empires are, right? The Ilkhanids, as you see here in Iran, the Khanat of Golden Horde, right? This is the eastern uh, Golden Horde, the white ones, right? That they become the Chagatai, known as the Chagatai Khanat, and the Khanat of the Great Khan, right? Or the Yuan dynasty, right? That is based in China, right? So this is your 13th and 14th century this way, right? And this is the same, your Murid realm at its greatest extent, my friends, right? You see that um, it has, it basically conquers Armenia here and Georgia here. It has Aleppo in Syria under it, and Sivas, right, an important city under its rule, but then not the rest of Anatolia. But on the other hand, on the east, right, it includes, Sir uh, not Oxus, and I always forget the name of this one. You remember? You remember that I forget. Okay. But in Persian, which is what they should be called, they are called Amu, Darya, and Sir Darya. Very easy. Amu, Darya means sea. Darya, Sir Darya. Okay. Okay. So this is the Timurid realm at its greatest extent, right? And as you can see, it includes all this sort of, uh, fabulously rich, very urban, very scientifically based, but of course Muslim cities, right? Like Tabriz, right? Mosul, Baghdad, Isfahan, Astarabad, Herat, Neishapur, Zaranj, Kandahar, Kabul, yeah, Balkh, Samarkand, Bukhara, and so on and so forth. A very extensive realm indeed. Meanwhile, my friends, one of the important things that I have to tell you, that all these Turkic dynasties, including the Ottomans that come up in 1453, right? All of these are extremely Persianized, right? Persianized, they adopt Persian culture, they adopt Persian as the language of administration and bureaucracy, right? They speak Turkish or Mongolian or whatnot amongst the family, but they are at least bilingual, right? My friends. So this is how the Persian culture spreads, right? Already from the Samanid period, remember the Samanids from 900 to 999, right? And basically the first Turkic dynasty that comes up, the Ghaznavids, on the wake of the Samanids, before the Seljuks come in, right, my friends? Samanids, Ghaznavids, Seljuks, right? So, so yeah, from the Samanids onward, basically, Persian becomes the lingua franca, meaning the one language that has become universal, right? Universal in the sense of the you know the region and the neighboring regions, right? I mean, Western Asia, basically, and the subcontinent, right? Anyway, Persian becomes the language of culture and administration, right? And it remains as such, basically, in a good part of this world until 19, say 40s or so. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, as I told you before, I think the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Turks, right? If you go, I mean, if you were to be a Turk and your grandfather was still living, he would and you were coming from the upper echelon of society, your grandfather for sure knew Persian and knew the treasury of Persian literature that was created actually during not only the Persian intermezzo, right, from 900 to 1100, um, uh, but also during this period, right, among the Turkic and Mongolian empires and populations, right? Meanwhile, right, this is how Anatolia looks like, right? You basically you have this is from 11th century onward, you have the Seljuqet of Rome established there, and of course Armenia was always there. Rich culture, rich history from ancient period onwards, my friends, and the Danish bandits, and the petty principalities that that we talked about, right? So they adopted Persian, right? We remember the Seljuks. We remember. We don't. Okay, the Rum Sultanate, right? Uh, okay, and the Rum Sultanate. Now, when I tell you, right, that uh, that the Changizid, I mean, Timur himself is coming from the Changizid line, right? But uh, if I tell you the different branches of the Mongolians and the Turks that were created, this is in Persian, doesn't matter, right? But you can see how it goes, right? It's quite elaborate, right, my friends? So, so it's very hard to know the genealogy to completely figure out who's who in the Turco-Mongolian period, right? But anyway, one of the Teymurid sultans, Ulugh right, was himself an astronomer and a mathematician, right? And these are scientists working in the observatory of Maraga, right, where the zodiac signs were elaborated upon and I yeah, so at least elaborated upon, and maybe there was more involved, but I forget it now, right? So it is this Sultanate of Rome, right? On the wake of Seljuks, right? They are toppled by the Mongolians coming, right? Basically, 1206. Remember, Temujin Chengiz starts his conquest, right? And onto the west is the Sultanate of Rum, right? Which is conquering Byzantine ports and the territories of rival Turkic dynasties, right? So it is um, the these Sultanate of Rome and the Byzantines who actually call upon the European crusaders, right? And and there is a lot to be told about the Crusaders. It is not my area of specialty at all, my friends. But one of the things that I can tell you is that they came to Anatolia on their way to Jerusalem in order um, to to take over Jerusalem from the Fatimids. Remember the Savaner Fatimids, my friends, right? They are now um, also contemporaneous, right? Sultanate of Rome, the coming of the Mongols, the uh, uh, the Crusaders, right, and the Fatimids, and so on and so forth, right. So this is the itinerary of the Crusaders, right. This is the Church of Holy Sepulchre, and this is a rendition of the siege of Damascus by the Crusaders from 1096 to 1204. There were four crusading sort of states that came basically in search of gold, right? Not for any, although they were quick to raise their um, their come on, their crosses, my friends, right. uh, the, spirituality was not their intent, right. If you read about them, it is about the riches that, where they came and got the best place, right, in one of the best places in Western Asia, right, Eastern Mediterranean, right. But they were short-lived. Outside of the principalities that they controlled, they meant basically nothing to people, right. They didn't sort of affect the lives of ordinary people. But my friends, remember remember that we had talked about the fact that already the Abbasid had taken over Sicily, and they had taken over Rhodes, and the Umayyads already had taken over Spain, and they're still there, right. In the midst of all of this, right. The crusaders are happening, right. But remember, I told you that yeah, Spain became basically ruled by Muslims, the same with Sicily, the same with Rhodes, right. And during the so-called golden age of Western Asia, there was also a golden age of Iberia, i.e., Spain, which was of course Muslim, right? So now you're talking about 900s to 1100s, and so on, right? The golden age, right, so to speak, right. So all the learning, all the sciences that we were talking about, right, all the sciences that we talked about that were beginning to be cultivated during the golden age, are now being transferred from Spain to the rest of Europe, from Sicily to the rest of Europe, from Rhodes to the rest of Europe, right. And you remember, Venice is right there, right. and uh, and Marseille and Lyon, right, and Paris, Dover, all of this, right. Why? They hear about the riches of the East, right, and come to the East. There are things happening in Europe itself that have to do with the fact that there are too many sons to these medieval barons, right? And that all of them cannot sort of be ruling parcels of land as it was the habit during the medieval period, during the feudal period, on the wake of the destruction of the Roman Empire in the West, right? Um, all of this knowledge is going to Europe, right? Um, and the Byzantines come in the 11th century. They take a whole sort of uh, assembly of sciences and riches and cultural elements, right, together back to Europe, right? And now, on the wake of these, the Mongols come, and the wake of these, the Timurids come, right, and they are busy making their contributions in the observatories that they are making here, and the Timurids are, the Western Asia is again experiencing a very rich cultural tradition, as a result of the coming of the Turco-Mongolians and their promotion, actually, of Persian cultural element, right? Also, anyway, this is how gradually the sciences are getting back to Europe, right? After going through a whole process of sifting and working on them and coming with syntheses and translating them and improving them and coming up with new sciences, right? And astronomy and all the astronomical and the mathematical and health sciences and everything that, that the the Eastern Romans themselves, the Byzantines, had forgotten, right? Had forgotten on, once Byzantium becomes basically Christian, right? And there are sparkles starting in the 8th century already in Europe, right? You have the Gauls in France, Charlemagne, right, is there, and Holy Roman Empire gradually gets created, and so on and so forth, right? So the the groundwork for reintroducing sciences to Europe, right, is laid by what? Okay, Roman Empire, let's say Constantine turning Christian, 300s, right? And you get to 1500s, when, you give it 1400s, that when you get the beginnings of Renaissance, right? And here you have a whole millennia, my friends, a whole millennia that is where everything is taking place basically in Asia and Africa, right? Culture is being, for a millennium, right? Yeah. Um, so this is the general contour of the history that you should be learning at the uh, uh, in next term, if you want to um, um, pursue the history of Asia, uh, the rich history of Asia, right? And so again, this is the Seljuqis of Rome, and the Mongols, right? Various petty dynasties, including the Turkish dynasties, including what? Including the Osmanli, the Ottoman sort of tribe, right? This is Anatolia for you in 1300, right? The Timurid Renaissance, right? Which it is not a Renaissance, as I told you, it's a continuation basically. Took place in the 14th to 16th century. Herat became another center of learning and sciences. Meanwhile, the Mahmud of Ghazna, remember Mahmud of Ghazna, has conquered northern India 3 times and has Islamicized this part of India, very, very rich, right? That's how Islam gets into the subcontinent. And that's how in the 1500s, when you have the Ottomans, which go from 1453 to 1922, you have the Safavids in Iran, also Turkic of course, but majority Persian population as usual, right? They go to from 1500 to 1700 something, right, in Iran. And then the Mughals in India, and this is the early modern period. In Western Asia, they also create empires, right? The Ottomans, especially, I will talk about a little bit here, and the Safavids in Iran, and the Mughals in India, and you have to take the sequel of this course, my friends, in order to see how everything continues, right? How culture and whatnot continues. To just give you an example, right? This is the Ottoman Empire in 1566, the Empire of the Ottomans. This is Ottoman Empire in 1683, right? And after the World War One, and after European colonialism begins, right, the Ottoman Empire becomes known in Europe as the sick man of Europe, right? A sick man that is sitting, right, up until 1900s, right, in this way, right, on the way of colonial Europe to Asia, right? So what needs to be done is to break up as Asia, right? Break up this Ottoman Empire and create the map of the so-called Middle East, Western Asia, as you have it today, and create the Palestinian-Israeli problem, create the artificial problem, create all the problems that are besetting the Middle East. But we don't have anything to do with the Middle East, right? We are talking about Western Asia, and of course, 1800 to 2000, that becomes the age of colonialism, and we are living today, my friends, in the age of neo-colonialism, believe it or not. Okay, my friends, this last video was longer also, but I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope that you enjoyed this course and you learned a lot from it. If you enjoyed it, if you learned a lot, please in either case, please make sure to write your reviews, right? And if you enjoyed it, please make sure to spread the word, right? And tell your friends that Pushayati is teaching this course, and it's quite interesting, if I may say so. But no, seriously, you guys, I wish you the best of luck in your uh, careers, and remember, one of your strengths, what will bring you a head and shoulder above everybody else, is your education. And in that education, if you know your history, right, you will be two heads and shoulders above and beyond everybody else in the world, right? Wishing you all the success, my friends. Have a brilliant next term. Okay. Ciao.